Welcome to Marple Whispers. I'm Sean. Tell me, where are you listening from right now? And what time is it there? I'd love to know. Share it in the comments along with how you liked the story. I reply to every single one of you. Now, let's step into the mystery. In the glittering halls of Bombay's Taj Mahal Hotel, where secrets swirl like monsoon winds, elderly sleuth Miss Jane Marple arrives for a sun-soaked escape, only to stumble into a deadly web of betrayal when wealthy merchant Rajesh Kapoor is found stabbed and poisoned in his locked suite. Suspicions ignite among a cast of suspects. A jealous colonel, a flirtatious wife, a trembling archaeologist, and a resentful niece harboring forbidden love. As clues unravel, forged wills, hidden jewels, and shadowy footprints, Miss Marple's keen village wisdom exposes the killer's cunning game. But in this opulent paradise of greed and revenge, can she unmask the murderer before another scream echoes through the night? Dive into this Agatha Christie-inspired mystery. Twists await. Chapter 1. The Arrival in Bombay. The SS Victoria sliced through the turquoise waters of the Arabian Sea like a knife through silk, her decks alive with the chatter of passengers eager to disembark after weeks at sea. Among them stood Miss Jane Marple, a slight figure in a sensible tweed suit, her white hair neatly pinned beneath a modest hat. The tropical sun beat down mercilessly, but Miss Marple's composure remained unruffled. She had faced fiercer heats in her imagination, poring over maps and travelogues in the quiet of her St. Mary Mead cottage. This voyage to India was no whim. It stemmed from an insistent letter from her dear friend, Lady Edith Hargreaves, whose husband, Sir Reginald, had entangled himself in the labyrinthine world of colonial trade. "You simply must come, Jane," Edith had written in her looping script. "The Taj Mahal Hotel is a wonder, a floating palace on land, and the mysteries here rival anything in your village scandals." As the ship docked amid the cacophony of horns and shouting porters, Miss Marple descended the gangplank with careful steps, her knitting bag clutched like a talisman. Bombay assaulted her senses. The salty tang of the sea mingled with the sharp spice of curry wafting from street carts, while rickshaws clattered past in a blur of colour. A liveried chauffeur from the hotel awaited her, bowing deeply as he ushered her into a gleaming motor car. The drive to the Taj Mahal Hotel wound through thronged bazaars, where merchants hawked silks and jewels under striped awnings, and sacred cows ambled with serene indifference. Miss Marple leaned back against the leather seats, her keen eyes absorbing it all. So much like the county fair, she thought, but with elephants instead of ponies, and secrets hidden in every fold of a sari. The hotel loomed ahead, a majestic Indo-Saracenic edifice of pink sandstone and white domes, its arches framing views of the gateway of Ushne, India, and the endless sea beyond. Built by a visionary industrialist to rival the world's grandest palaces, it exuded an air of opulent intrigue, where Maharajas rubbed shoulders with British expatriates. Miss Marple was shown to her suite on the upper floor, a haven of cool marble and heavy velvet drapes. As the bellboy departed with a generous tip, far more than necessary, but one must encourage good service, she unpacked her few belongings: a well-thumbed Bible, a spare cardigan, and her ever-present knitting. Pausing by the French doors, she stepped onto the balcony, where the evening breeze carried the distant hum of the city. It was then that she heard it, a low, fervent argument from the adjacent suite. "The will is ironclad, you fool," hissed a man's voice, laced with an Indian accent. "But if he changes it now," replied a woman, her tone trembling with urgency. Miss Marple tilted her head ever so slightly, her expression one of mild interest, as if admiring the sunset. The voices faded into murmurs, but not before she caught a name, Priya. How fascinating, she mused, drawing the curtains. Inheritance disputes were as common as afternoon tea in St. Mary Mead. Dear old Mr. Raphael had one that nearly ended in tragedy. But here, amid exotic splendour, they took on a sharper edge. That evening, dressed in her best pearl-grey frock, Miss Marple descended to the sea lounge for dinner. The room was a symphony of crystal and candlelight, with liveried waiters gliding between tables laden with silver and exotic blooms. Lady Edith spotted her immediately and waved her over with enthusiasm. "Jane, darling, you look remarkably fresh after that voyage. Come meet everyone. Reginald's gathered quite the menagerie." Sir Reginald Hargreaves, a burly man with a florid complexion and a perpetual squint from years under the Indian sun, rose to greet her. "Miss Marple, a pleasure. Edith's told me of your observational talents. Hope you'll find our little corner of empire diverting." Seated at the long teak table, Miss Marple was introduced to the assembled guests, each one a study in contrasts. Colonel Desmond Blake, retired from the Indian Army, sported a bristling moustache and a ramrod posture that spoke of parade grounds long past. His stories of tiger hunts in the Punjab flowed like vintage port, but Miss Marple noted the way his hand clenched his napkin when India's independence was mentioned. A man clinging to faded glories. Beside him sat his wife, Amelia, a vivacious blonde in her 30s, her emerald gown cut daringly low. Her laughter pealed like bells, yet her eyes flicked nervously toward the door, as if expecting an unwelcome visitor. Then there was Rajesh Kapoor, a prosperous merchant in spices and antiquities, his silk shawani embroidered with gold thread. His smile was polished, but his gaze sharp as a bazaar bargain, assessing, calculating. "Miss Marple," he said, inclining his head, "you honour us. Have you tried our masala? Chai? It reveals secrets in its steam." His niece, Priya Kapoor, a striking young woman with coal-lined eyes and a cascade of raven hair, nodded politely but said little. She toyed with a heavy gold bangle on her wrist, her fingers betraying a subtle tremor. What burden did she carry, Miss Marple wondered. It reminded her of young Elsie back home, whose fidgeting had unveiled a web of deceit. Rounding out the party was Dr. Elias Thorne, an archaeologist with sun-weathered skin and wire-rimmed spectacles. His talk of unearthed Muggle treasures was erudite, but Miss Marple observed the faint shake in his hands as he lifted his glass. Nerves, perhaps, or something more sinister? Conversation turned to Sir Reginald's latest venture, a consortium trading in rare artifacts. Tensions simmered beneath the pleasantries. Rajesh alluded to irregularities in a shipment, while Colonel Blake dismissed it with a snort. "Damned red tape, that's all." Amelia changed the subject artfully, praising the hotel's orchestra, but Lady Edith's forced smile did not escape Miss Marple's notice. As the meal progressed, curried prawns and fragrant biryani, Miss Marple contributed little, content to listen and observe. A waiter dropped a spoon with a clatter, and in that moment she saw Rajesh exchange a fleeting glance with Dr. Thorne, laden with unspoken warning. People are indeed the same the world over, she reflected silently, folding her napkin. Greed, envy, hidden passions, they bloom in any soil. Little did she know, as the group dispersed into the balmy night, that one among them harboured a darkness that would soon shatter the hotel's gilded facade. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Moonlight. The first rays of dawn pierced the lace curtains of Miss Marple's suite, casting a golden haze over the polished teak furniture. Bombay awoke with a symphony of sounds, the rhythmic clang of temple bells, the hoarse cries of street vendors peddling fresh mangoes and spiced chai, and the faint, haunting call of the muezzin summoning the faithful to prayer. Miss Marple, having risen early, as was her custom, dressed in a light cotton frock suitable for the cloying heat, and slipped out for a morning constitutional. Her knitting bag dangled from her arm, its contents, a half-finished scarf and a pair of needles, serving as both hobby and camouflage. In St. Mary Mead, such accessories had often lulled suspects into complacency. Here, in this foreign land, she suspected they would prove equally effective. She made her way to the Gateway of India, that monumental arch of basalt stone erected to commemorate a royal visit long past. The promenade bustled with life, fishermen mending nets by their dhows, children chasing pigeons across the cobbled plaza, and tourists in pith helmets snapping photographs. Miss Marple paused to admire the intricate carvings, her mind drifting to parallels with the village war memorial back home. But her eyes were ever watchful. A shadowy figure lingered near the water's edge. A man in a nondescript kurta, glancing furtively over his shoulder before vanishing into the crowd. Suspicious, she murmured to herself, or merely cautious. In a city like this, one mustn't jump to conclusions. Returning to the Taj Mahal Hotel by mid-morning, she found the lobby a hive of activity. Porters in starched uniforms ferried trunks, while a group of elegantly dressed women chattered about the latest fashions from Paris. Miss Marple ascended to her floor, noting the faint echo of raised voices from behind a closed door. Suite 401, she recalled, belonging to Rajesh Kapoor. The words were indistinct, but the tone was sharp, accusatory. She filed it away like a snippet of yarn in her bag. The afternoon brought a languid torpor to the hotel, the heat driving guests indoors. Miss Marple joined the Hargreaves' party for tea in the palm-fringed Shamiana lounge, where ceiling fans stirred the air lazily, and waiters in turbans served scones alongside delicate pistachio burfis. Lady Edith presided over the gathering with her usual poise, pouring from a silver pot with a steady hand. "Jane, do try the cucumber sandwiches. They're quite English, despite the surroundings," she said, her eyes twinkling. Colonel Desmond Blake held court at one end of the table, his voice booming like artillery fire. "Back in '98, during the Punjab uprising, I led a charge against a band of rebels, shot the leader clean through the heart from 50 yards. He slapped his thigh for emphasis, his moustache quivering. Amelia Blake, perched beside him, rolled her eyes playfully but leaned in to refill his cup, her diamond rings catching the light. Miss Marple observed how Amelia's gaze strayed to Dr. Elias Thorne, seated opposite. The archaeologist nodded politely at the colonel's tale, but his fingers drummed an impatient rhythm on the tablecloth. "Fascinating, Colonel," he interjected dryly, though one wonders if those rebels were merely defending their heritage. I've unearthed artifacts from that era, swords etched with prayers for victory. Priya Kapoor occupied a corner chair, her silk sari a vibrant splash of crimson against the cream upholstery. She sipped her tea in silence, her long fingers absently twisting the gold bracelet on her wrist, a habit that spoke volumes to Miss Marple. It reminded her of young Margaret in the village, who had fidgeted similarly before confessing to a petty theft. Rajesh Kapoor watched his niece with an intensity that bordered on predatory, his dark eyes narrowing whenever she shifted. "Priya, my dear," he said smoothly, "you seem distracted. Is the heat troubling you?" She forced a smile. "Not at all, uncle. Merely lost in thought." Sir Reginald, mopping his brow with a linen handkerchief, steered the conversation to business. "Thorn, about that consignment of Muggle relics. Any word on authentication?" Dr. Thorne adjusted his spectacles. "Promising, Sir Reginald, but one must be cautious. Forgeries abound in these markets." Miss Marple, nibbling a macaroon, listened intently. The undercurrents were palpable. A flicker of unease in Sir Reginald's eyes. A subtle stiffening in Rajesh's posture. Lady Edith changed the subject adroitly, inquiring about Miss Marple's impressions of Bombay. "Overwhelming, yet charming," Miss Marple replied mildly. "Rather like a garden party, where not everyone is invited for the same reason." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the group migrated to the terrace for cocktails, the sea breeze offering respite from the day's swelter. The Arabian Sea stretched out like a sheet of molten silver, dotted with fishing boats returning with their hauls. Lanterns flickered to life along the balustrade, casting elongated shadows that danced like conspirators. Miss Marple settled into a wicker chair, her knitting needles clicking softly, a sound that blended seamlessly with the murmur of waves and the clink of glasses. Sir Reginald and Rajesh Kapoor stood apart, their discussion growing heated under the guise of civility. Miss Marple, feigning a light doze with her eyes half closed behind her spectacles, strained to catch the words carried on the wind. "That shipment was compromised, Kapoor," Sir Reginald growled, his voice low but vehement. "Smuggling allegations could ruin us both." Rajesh's response was silky, laced with menace. "Allegations, my friend, or truths you'd rather bury? Cross me, and you'll regret it." Lady Edith, nearby, turned pale, her fan fluttering rapidly as if to ward off the tension. She glanced toward Miss Marple, but the elderly sleuth appeared oblivious, her needles weaving intricate patterns. Amelia Blake, radiant in a flowing chiffon gown, circulated with a tray of martinis, her laughter a bright counterpoint to the gathering dusk. She lingered by Dr. Thorne, her hand brushing his arm as she offered him a glass. "Elias, you must tell me more about those ancient tombs. So romantic, don't you think?" Thorne's tremor was more evident now, his smile strained. "Romantic? Perhaps, Mrs. Blake, but danger lurks in the past as much as the present." Colonel Blake, nursing a whiskey, shot a glare their way but said nothing, his jaw set like granite. Priya excused herself early, pleading a headache, and Miss Marple noted how Rajesh's eyes followed her retreat. As the evening wore on, the stars emerged, pinpricks of light mirroring the hotel's glowing facade on the water. Miss Marple rose to retire, bidding the group good night with her customary politeness. The corridors were dimly lit, scented with jasmine from hidden vases. Pausing at her door, she glimpsed a figure in the shadows. Amelia, slipping a folded note under Dr. Thorne's door with furtive haste. She vanished around the corner before Miss Marple could react. Young people and their intrigues, Miss Marple thought, turning her key. So dramatic, yet often the prelude to something far graver. Like that affair with the vicar's daughter. Harmless notes until they weren't. She prepared for bed, the city's nocturnal hum a soothing backdrop. Sleep came lightly, as it always did for one attuned to the world's subtleties. Hours later, in the dead of night, a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing through the marbled halls like a harbinger of doom. Miss Marple sat bolt upright, her heart steady despite the jolt. Throwing a shawl over her nightdress, she stepped into the corridor, the first to emerge into the flickering gaslight. Doors creaked open around her, sleepy faces peering out in alarm. The scream had come from the direction of Rajesh Kapoor's suite, a sound raw with terror, promising revelations that would unravel the fragile web of civility woven over the past day. Chapter 3. The Body in the Suite. The scream that tore through the Taj Mahal Hotel's corridors at precisely 2:17 a.m. was not the sort to be ignored. It was a raw, jagged sound, laced with panic and horror, and it propelled Miss Jane Marple from her bed with surprising alacrity for a woman of her years. She donned a woolen shawl over her nightdress, her movements brisk yet deliberate, and stepped into the hallway. The gas lamps cast a sallow glow, their flickering light painting grotesque shadows on the ornate wallpaper. Other doors were opening now, bleary-eyed guests emerging in various states of disarray, but Miss Marple was the first to reach Suite 402, where the sound had originated. The door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the crimson carpet. Inside, chaos reigned. Rajesh Kapoor lay sprawled across a sumptuous Persian rug, his silk kurta soaked with blood that gleamed black in the lamplight. A jewelled dagger, its hilt encrusted with emeralds, protruded from his chest, pinning him to the floor like a grotesque specimen. His eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the ceiling fan, which turned lazily above, indifferent to the scene below. Priya Kapoor stood frozen in the doorway, her hands clutching the frame, her sari dishevelled, her face a mask of shock. "He's dead," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Uncle, he's gone." The hotel manager, Mr. Vikram Singh, arrived moments later, his turban slightly askew, his usual composure fraying. "Good heavens, what has happened?" he gasped, wringing his hands as he surveyed the carnage. Colonel Desmond Blake pushed past him, his nightshirt tucked hastily into trousers, barking, "Stand aside, man! Let me see!" Amelia Blake hovered behind him, her face pale beneath her rouge, while Dr. Elias Thorne lingered at the threshold, his spectacles glinting as he peered inside. Sir Reginald and Lady Edith Hargreaves appeared last, she in a silk robe, he muttering about damned disturbances. Miss Marple, unnoticed in her corner, took in every detail. The overturned glass of chai on the bedside table, the faint scent of bitter almonds mingling with jasmine, and a crumpled telegram half hidden beneath a velvet cushion. Inspector Vikram Patel of the Bombay Police arrived with commendable speed, his dark eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk. A lean man with a neatly trimmed beard, he carried a leather notebook and an air of quiet authority. "Nobody leaves," he commanded, motioning for a constable to guard the door. "This is a crime scene. The door was locked from the inside, yes?" Mr. Singh nodded vigorously. "Yes, Inspector, but the balcony door was open. Sea breeze, you see." Patel's gaze flicked to the balcony, where sheer curtains billowed like ghosts. "Suicide, perhaps?" he mused, kneeling beside the body. "Or murder, with poison on the blade." Miss Marple, edging closer under the pretense of adjusting her shawl, cleared her throat softly. "If I may, Inspector, that dagger, it's from the hotel's display case in the lobby, is it not? Accessible to anyone with a mind to take it." Patel glanced at her, his expression a mix of surprise and mild irritation, clearly unaccustomed to elderly spinsters offering insights. "And you are?" "Miss Marple, a guest," she replied with a disarming smile. "I've a habit of noticing things. For instance, that footprint on the balcony railing, too small for Mr. Kapoor's feet, wouldn't you say?" The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the balcony. A faint smudge, barely discernible in the moonlight, marked the polished teak railing, a print no larger than a woman's shoe. Patel's brow furrowed as he jotted a note. "Astute, madam. We'll examine it." He turned to the telegram, unfolding it with gloved hands. The words were stark. "Deal off! Thorne knows!" Dr. Thorne's face blanched, his tremor more pronounced as he stammered. I don't know what that means. Rajesh consulted me about artifacts, nothing more." The interrogation began in earnest. Colonel Blake admitted to an old grudge from their army days, when Rajesh, then a young supplier, had shorted provisions to Blake's regiment. "The man was a swindler," he growled, "but I didn't kill him." Amelia, her voice trembling, confessed that Rajesh had been pressing her with veiled threats about a past indiscretion in Calcutta, a liaison that could ruin her marriage. "He wanted money," she whispered, tears smudging her mascara. Priya, still shaken, revealed that her uncle had altered his will that very morning, cutting her out entirely. "He said I was ungrateful," she murmured, her fingers twisting her bracelet. A piece, Miss Marple noted, that matched a description of jewels kept in Rajesh's safe. Sir Reginald claimed he'd been in the hotel bar until midnight, a fact Lady Edith hesitantly corroborated. "He was rather deep in his cups," she said, her eyes avoiding Miss Marple's. Dr. Thorne denied any involvement, insisting the telegram referred to a professional dispute over forged antiquities. "Kapoor was meddling in dangerous markets," he said, his voice tight. "I warned him to stop." Inspector Patel scribbled furiously, his skepticism palpable. "And this safe?" he asked, pointing to a brass-bound chest in the corner. Mr. Singh produced a master key, but the safe was locked, its contents a mystery for now. As the police cordoned off the suite, Miss Marple lingered, her gaze sweeping the room. The overturned chai glass intrigued her. Its contents had spilled across the table, leaving a sticky residue that glistened oddly. She recalled a case in St. Mary Mead, where a poisoned cordial had been disguised by sugar syrup. "Inspector," she ventured, "might you test that chai? The smell of almonds is suggestive." Patel nodded curtly, signalling a constable to collect the glass. "You have a nose for trouble, Miss Marple," he said, not unkindly. "We'll see what the laboratory says." The group was dismissed to their rooms, but the hotel hummed with unease. Miss Marple returned to her suite, her mind a whirl of threads waiting to be woven. The footprint, the telegram, the dagger, the chai, each a piece of a puzzle, much like the tangled affairs of old Mrs. Bantry's household. She sat by her window, the sea a dark expanse beyond, and considered the players. Priya's distress seemed genuine, yet her bracelet raised questions. Amelia's tears masked something, guilt or fear. Colonel Blake's bluster felt forced, and Dr. Thorne's denials rang hollow. Sir Reginald's business dealings with Rajesh hinted at deeper motives, and Lady Edith's hesitation was telling. As she prepared for bed, a faint rustle outside caught her attention. Peering through the curtains, she saw a figure in the garden below, a woman, perhaps, moving stealthily toward the banyan tree. The moonlight was too dim to be certain, but Miss Marple's instincts prickled. "People think darkness hides their secrets," she mused, "but it only sharpens the observer's eye." She made a mental note to inspect the garden come morning. For now, sleep beckoned, though she knew it would be fleeting. The Taj Mahal Hotel, with its glittering facade, had revealed its first corpse, and Miss Marple was certain it would not be the last to cast its shadow across this opulent stage. Chapter 4. Clues. Amid the chaos. The Taj Mahal Hotel awoke to a subdued dawn, its usual vibrancy muted by the grim events of the night. The news of Rajesh Kapoor's murder had spread like wildfire through the marbled corridors, igniting whispers among the staff and nervous glances among the guests. Miss Jane Marple, however, was undeterred by the atmosphere of unease. She sat on her balcony, sipping a cup of Darjeeling tea, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she surveyed the gardens below. The banyan tree, where she had glimpsed a shadowy figure in the moonlight, stood serene in the morning mist, its gnarled roots beckoning like a silent witness. People are careless, she thought, recalling a similar incident in St. Mary Mead, where a discarded glove had unravelled a theft. They leave traces, even when they think they've covered their tracks. After a light breakfast of toast and mango preserves, Miss Marple descended to the lobby, her sensible shoes silent on the polished floors. The hotel buzzed with subdued activity. Porters moved with exaggerated care, and the concierge fielded anxious inquiries about safety. She overheard a waiter whispering to a colleague about an argument he'd witnessed the previous day. Dr. Elias Thorne and Rajesh Kapoor, heated words exchanged in the corridor over tainted relics. Miss Marple filed this away, her mind weaving connections like the intricate lace shawl in her bag. Dr. Thorne's hands tremble, she mused. But is it fear, guilt, or merely age? She made her way to the Shamiana Lounge, where Inspector Vikram Patel had set up a makeshift office, his desk cluttered with reports and a steaming cup of chai. He looked up as she entered, his stern expression softening slightly. "Miss Marple, your nose for details is proving useful. The chai from Kapoor's room, traces of cyanide, just as you suspected." She nodded, her eyes bright with interest. "And the dagger, any fingerprints?" Patel shook his head. "Wiped clean, but the poison suggests premeditation. The dagger may be a distraction." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Or a message, Inspector. In my village, a knife was once used to point to the wrong suspect, quite deliberately." The inspector invited her to join him in re-examining the crime scene, a courtesy she accepted with a demure nod. Suite 402 was sealed, but a constable admitted them, and Miss Marple's gaze swept the room anew. The blood-stained rug had been removed, but the overturned chai glass remained on the table, its sticky residue now under laboratory scrutiny. She approached the balcony, where the faint footprint on the railing had been dusted for prints. "None found," Patel noted with frustration. "A woman's shoe, you said, but Mrs. Blake was with Lady Hargreaves at the time of death, and Miss Kapoor claims she was in her room." Miss Marple's lips pursed. "Claims, Inspector, are not facts. People lie as easily as they breathe, especially when frightened." Her attention turned to the brass-bound safe, still unopened. Mr. Singh, summoned with his master key, arrived with a furrowed brow. "Mr. Kapoor was particular about this safe," he said, turning the key with a click. The door swung open to reveal a velvet-lined interior, empty, save for a single sheet of paper. Patel retrieved it, a list of jewels, including a gold bracelet encrusted with rubies, matching the one Priya wore. "Stolen, perhaps?" Patel mused. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Or taken by someone who knew its value. Miss Kapoor's distress last night seemed rehearsed." As they left the suite, Miss Marple requested a moment in the gardens. The banyan trees' sprawling branches cast dappled shadows, and she knelt carefully, her fingers probing the soft earth. There, half buried beneath a root, she found it, a small glass vial, its label faded but legible. Aconite. She handed it to Patel, who frowned. Monkshood poison. Deadly, but different from the cyanide in the chai. 2 poisons? Miss Marple's smile was faint. Or one crime disguised as another. In St. Mary Mead, a gardener once used aconite to settle a grudge. Clumsily, I might add. Back in the lounge, the suspects were summoned for further questioning. Colonel Blake, his face flushed with indignation, reiterated his alibi, playing cards in the smoking room until 1 a.m. A bellboy, however, contradicted him, recalling the colonel near Suite 402 around the time of the scream. Nonsense, Blake thundered, but his bluster faltered under Patel's scrutiny. Amelia Blake, her eyes red-rimmed, produced the note she'd slipped under Dr. Thorne's door, a plea for advice on escaping her husband's suffocating jealousy. Rajesh knew about my past, she admitted, twisting a handkerchief. He threatened to tell Desmond unless I paid him. Dr. Thorne, his spectacles fogging with nervous perspiration, insisted his dealings with Rajesh were purely professional. He wanted my expertise on Mughal artifacts. Some were suspect, possibly smuggled. I urged him to report it, but he laughed. Miss Marple noted the insignia on Thorne's cufflinks. A coiled serpent, identical to one on Rajesh's letterhead. A merchant guild, perhaps, she asked innocently. Thorne flushed. A coincidence. I bought these in a bazaar. Priya Kapoor, summoned last, was composed but pale, her bracelet glinting as she clasped her hands. My uncle was cruel, she said softly. He controlled my life, my choices, but I didn't kill him. Her eyes met Miss Marple's, and for a moment something flickered. Defiance or desperation? Lady Edith, hovering nearby, confided to Miss Marple as they left. Priya's been unhappy for years. Rajesh treated her like a possession, not a niece. Miss Marple nodded, thinking of a St. Mary Mead girl whose domineering father had pushed her to rebellion. As evening fell, the hotel's opulence seemed to mock the grim proceedings. Miss Marple dined alone in the sea lounge, her thoughts circling the clues, the cyanide-laced chai, the aconite vial, the missing jewels, the telegram implicating Thorne. She recalled a case where a poisoner had used 2 toxins to confuse the police. A clever ruse, but not infallible. The footprint nagged at her. It was too deliberate, like a clue planted to mislead. Someone wants us to look one way, she murmured, while the truth lies elsewhere. A sudden commotion interrupted her reverie. A maid, clearing tables, had found a crumpled receipt in the lounge, dated the previous day, from a chemist's shop known for selling rare compounds. The name on it, Elias Thorne. Miss Marple's needles paused mid-stitch. Curious, she said to herself, but too convenient. Like the time young Tommy left a forged note to frame his rival. She resolved to speak with the maid later, to learn where exactly the receipt had been found. As she retired to her suite, the sea breeze carried a faint chill, and the hotel's grandeur felt hollow. The murder had cracked open a web of secrets, greed, betrayal, hidden passions, all simmering beneath the polished surface. Miss Marple sat by her window, knitting forgotten, her mind piecing together the mosaic. The aconite vial suggested a second plan, perhaps abandoned. The empty safe pointed to theft, but by whom? Priya's bracelet, Amelia's note, Thorne's cufflinks. Each was a thread, leading to a knot she had yet to untangle. People are predictable, she thought, even in their wickedness. And wickedness, like a poorly knitted scarf, always unravels in the end. Chapter 5. The Hidden Motives. The Taj Mahal Hotel, bathed in the amber glow of late afternoon, seemed to hold its breath as the investigation into Rajesh Kapoor's murder deepened. The air was thick with suspicion, and the opulent corridors echoed with hushed speculations. Miss Jane Marple, seated in the sea lounge with a cup of Earl Grey, observed the comings and goings of the hotel's guests with her usual quiet intensity. Her knitting lay idle in her lap, the needles still as her mind wove through the tangle of clues, the cyanide-laced chai, the aconite vial, the missing jewels, and the damning receipt bearing Dr. Elias Thorne's name. It's like Mrs. Eldridge's garden party, she reflected, where everyone smiled, but the air was thick with secrets. The morning had brought a breakthrough. The hotel's locksmith had finally opened Rajesh Kapoor's safe, revealing not the expected trove of gems, but a single document, a forged will naming Dr. Thorne as the sole beneficiary of Kapoor's vast estate. Inspector Vikram Patel, his notebook now a labyrinth of scribbled suspicions, confronted Thorne in the Shamiana lounge. "Explain this, Doctor," he demanded, brandishing the paper. Thorne's face drained of colour, his hands shaking as he adjusted his spectacles. "It's a fabrication. I had no claim to his wealth. Rajesh asked me to authenticate artifacts, not inherit them." His voice cracked, but Miss Marple noted the sweat beading on his brow, a telltale sign, much like young Mr. Phipps in St. Mary Mead, who had stammered his way through a lie about stolen silver. Lady Edith Hargreaves, ever the gracious hostess, invited Miss Marple for a private rickshaw ride through Bombay's bustling streets to clear their minds. As the rickshaw jolted past spice markets and colonial facades, Edith confided, "Reginald's business is in dire straits, Jane. Rajesh's death cancels a debt we couldn't pay. I'm terrified it makes him look guilty." Miss Marple patted her hand, her eyes scanning the vibrant chaos outside. "Debt is a powerful motive, my dear, but not the only one. In my village, a man once killed for less, a mere slight at a whist game." Edith's eyes widened, but Miss Marple's gentle smile belied the steel in her thoughts. Back at the hotel, the atmosphere grew taut. In the grand dining room, a heated exchange erupted between Priya Kapoor and Amelia Blake. Priya, her eyes flashing, accused Amelia of stealing from her uncle's safe. "That locket you wear, it's his, isn't it? I saw it in his collection." Amelia's hand flew to the gold locket at her throat, revealing a miniature portrait of Rajesh inside. "He gave it to me," she cried, her voice shrill. "A keepsake, nothing more." Colonel Blake, glowering nearby, muttered about disloyal wives. But Miss Marple caught the flicker of guilt in Amelia's eyes, reminiscent of a St. Mary Mead widow caught pilfering from a church fund. Inspector Patel, meanwhile, made a startling move. He arrested Colonel Blake after a search of his room uncovered a vial of cyanide crystals hidden in a cigar box. "You were seen near Kapoor's suite," Patel said sternly, "and this poison matches the chai." Blake roared in protest, his moustache quivering. "I'm no murderer. I despise the man, but I'd not stoop to poison." Miss Marple, observing from a corner, shook her head. "Too obvious, Inspector," she murmured to herself. "Like the time Tommy Pierce left a stolen watch in plain sight to frame another. The real culprit is subtler." As dusk fell, the hotel's terrace glittered with lanterns, but the mood was sombre. Miss Marple joined the group for cocktails, her presence unassuming yet magnetic. She listened as Sir Reginald spoke of his strained partnership with Rajesh, hinting at smuggling allegations that could ruin his reputation. Dr. Thorne, still shaken, admitted to a shared venture with Rajesh in the antiquities trade, but swore he'd never profited from it. Priya, sipping a lime soda, remained silent, her bracelet catching the light, a constant reminder of the safe's missing contents. Amelia, clinging to her husband's arm, avoided eye contact her locket now tucked beneath her dress. The evening took a darker turn when a second scream pierced the night, this time from Priya's suite. Miss Marple, ever alert, was among the first to arrive, her shawl hastily thrown over her shoulders. Priya stood trembling, unharmed but clutching a note slipped under her door. "You're next. Leave or die." The handwriting was jagged, scrawled in haste, and Patel bagged it as evidence. "Someone wants to silence her," he said, his eyes narrowing. Miss Marple, peering at the note, noted its ink, a deep indigo, rare and costly, used by the hotel stationery. A clue left in plain sight, she thought, like Mrs. Carson's threatening letter, penned to deflect suspicion. Back in her suite, Miss Marple sat by the window, the sea's rhythmic pulse a counterpoint to her racing thoughts. The forged will pointed to Thorn, but its brazenness suggested a frame-up. The cyanide in Blake's room was too convenient, and Amelia's locket hinted at a personal connection to Rajesh, perhaps an affair, or blackmail. Priya's bracelet and the threatening note were troubling. Her grief seemed genuine, yet her actions were calculated. Sir Reginald's debt offered a motive, but Lady Edith's loyalty muddied the waters. "Everyone has a secret," Miss Marple mused, "but only one has blood on their hands." She recalled the chemist's receipt found in the lounge, supposedly Thorn's. A quiet word with the maid revealed it had been tucked beneath a cushion near Priya's usual seat, not Thorn's. Planted evidence, Miss Marple thought, like the time young Elsie hid a stolen brooch to incriminate her rival. The aconite vial in the garden nagged at her, a second poison, discarded too carelessly. Was it a backup plan or a deliberate misdirection? The footprint on the balcony, small and precise, suggested a woman's involvement, yet Amelia's alibi held firm, and Priya's movements were unaccounted for. As midnight approached, Miss Marple lit a small lamp and jotted notes in her pocketbook, her handwriting as neat as her knitting. The clues formed a pattern, but gaps remained. The telegram, Thorn knows, implied knowledge of Rajesh's illicit dealings, but Thorn's denials rang partially true. The empty safe suggested theft, but the forged will pointed to a deeper game. Priya's bracelet, the locket, the cyanide, the aconite, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit. It's like the vicar's embezzlement, she thought, where the truth lay not in the loudest clues, but the quietest. A soft knock interrupted her. Lady Edith stood at the door, her face pale. "Jane, I heard the scream. Is Priya safe?" Miss Marple nodded, ushering her inside. "For now, my dear, but someone is frightened, or wants us to think so." As Edith left, Miss Marple returned to her notes, her mind sharpening. The Taj Mahal Hotel, with its glittering domes and whispered secrets, was a stage for human frailty. The killer was among them, their masks slipping with each passing hour. "Tomorrow," she resolved, "I shall tug at these threads and see which unravel first." Chapter 6. Twists in the Tropics. The Taj Mahal Hotel, its domes aglow under the Bombay sun, seemed to pulse with secrets as the investigation into Rajesh Kapoor's murder reached a fevered pitch. The air was heavy with the scent of frangipani and suspicion, and the once gleaming corridors now felt like a stage for a grim drama. Miss Jane Marple, seated in her suite with a cup of cooling tea, reviewed her pocketbook notes, her neat handwriting cataloguing the web of clues, the cyanide-laced chai, the aconite vial, the forged will, the threatening note to Priya, and the elusive footprint on the balcony. Each piece was a thread, but the pattern remained incomplete. "It's like old Mrs. Pritchard's quilt," she thought, "beautiful on the surface, but the stitches hid a scandal." Determined to unravel the truth, Miss Marple requested a private meeting with Inspector Vikram Patel and the suspects in the hotel's crystal room, a glittering chamber of chandeliers and mirrored walls. Patel, intrigued by her quiet persistence, agreed, and by late afternoon the group assembled. Colonel Desmond Blake, his face thunderous despite his release from custody. Amelia Blake, clutching a silk fan to mask her unease. Dr. Elias Thorne, his spectacles slipping down his sweat-slicked nose. Priya Kapoor, her eyes guarded behind a composed facade. And Sir Reginald and Lady Edith Hargreaves, their expressions a mix of weariness and apprehension. Miss Marple, in her modest lavender dress, took a seat at the head of the table, her knitting bag at her side like a faithful companion. "Thank you for indulging an old woman's whim," she began, her voice soft but commanding attention. "In my village of St. Mary Mead, I've learned that human nature is much the same, whether in a cottage or a palace. Greed, love, revenge, they weave the same patterns." The room stilled, every eye on her, she continued, her tone measured. "Mr. Kapoor's death is no simple crime. The clues are deliberate, like steps in a dance, meant to mislead." She turned to the footprint on the balcony, revealed by forensic analysis to match a woman's size 6 shoe. "Mrs. Blake, your alibi with Lady Hargreaves is solid, yet the footprint suggests a woman's presence. Curious, isn't it?" Amelia's fan fluttered faster, but she said nothing. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to Priya. "Miss Kapoor, your bracelet matches the missing jewels, yet you claim innocence, and that threatening note, written in the hotel's rare indigo ink, suggests someone close to the scene." Priya's lips tightened, but she held Miss Marple's gaze. The telegram, Thorne knows, was next. Dr. Thorne shifted uncomfortably as Miss Marple recounted its implications. "You admitted to a partnership with Mr. Kapoor in antiquities, Doctor. Smuggling, perhaps. The telegram suggests you knew his secrets." Thorne's voice rose, strained. "I knew of his dealings, yes, but I didn't kill him. He was reckless, mixing with dangerous men in the black market." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Yet the forged will naming you beneficiary is troubling. Too convenient, like a clue left to point fingers." She turned to the poisons. Cyanide in the chai, aconite in the garden. 2 toxins suggest either desperation or cunning. The dagger, wiped clean, was a theatrical touch, but its angle, too high for a self-inflicted wound, rules out suicide. Patel nodded, his notebook open. "The cyanide killed him, Miss Marple. The dagger was post-mortem." She smiled faintly. "Indeed, someone wanted us to chase shadows." Colonel Blake, his patience fraying, slammed a fist on the table. "Enough of this. I'm no poisoner, and my wife was nowhere near that room." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Quite so, Colonel. But your presence near Suite 402, as the bellboy confirmed, raises questions. And the cyanide in your room. Planted, perhaps?" Blake's bluster faltered, his face reddening. Sir Reginald, silent until now, cleared his throat. "Miss Marple, surely you don't suspect us all? My dealings with Kapoor were business, nothing more." Lady Edith gripped his arm, her knuckles white. Miss Marple's voice softened. "Business can breed desperation, Sir Reginald. A debt erased by death is a powerful motive, as I saw in St. Mary Mead when a merchant killed to save his shop." The room grew tense, the chandeliers casting fractured light across the faces. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The key lies in the safe's contents, or lack thereof. The jewels were taken, but the forged will left behind. Why? To frame Dr. Thorne? Or to distract from the real prize? She paused, her gaze settling on Priya. Miss Kapoor, you were cut from your uncle's will. You spoke of his cruelty, his control. That bracelet, stolen from the safe, perhaps by your own hand. Priya's composure cracked, her eyes blazing. How dare you? I loved my uncle despite his faults. Prove it, old woman. Miss Marple's smile was serene. Proof is in the details, my dear. The receipt for poison, found near your seat. The note in your handwriting, disguised but not perfectly. And your shoes, size 6, I believe. The room gasped, and Patel's eyes widened. Priya's hands clenched, her bracelet glinting like an accusation. Miss Marple produced a small envelope from her bag, handing it to Patel. This contains a scrap of fabric, caught on the banyan tree where the aconite vial was found. It matches Miss Kapoor's sari from the night of the murder. Priya stood, her voice shrill. Lies! I was in my room. But Patel, examining the fabric, signalled a constable. We'll verify this, Miss Kapoor. Don't leave the hotel. As the group dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, her mind racing. The fabric was a gamble. She'd found it near the tree, but its owner was uncertain. Yet Priya's reaction confirmed her suspicions. Like young Clara in the village, she thought, who betrayed herself with a single flinch. The threatening note, the bracelet, the receipt, all pointed to Priya, but the motive was murky. Was it greed for the jewels, or revenge for years of control? The forged will suggested a deeper plot, perhaps to implicate Thorne, whose smuggling ties were no coincidence. That night, Miss Marple dined quietly, observing the suspects from afar. Amelia whispered urgently to her husband, who shook his head. Thorne sat alone, his hands steady for the first time, as if resigned. Sir Reginald and Lady Edith avoided the group, their faces drawn. Priya, under watch, was absent, her absence louder than words. Miss Marple sipped her soup, her thoughts circling. The aconite vial was a red herring, she decided, discarded to confuse, not used. The cyanide was the true weapon, swift and silent, delivered in the chai by someone trusted. As she retired, a faint sound reached her, a rustle outside her balcony. Peering through the curtains, she saw nothing but shadows, yet her instincts prickled. Someone is watching, she thought, or planning. She locked the balcony door, her mind alight with possibilities. The Taj Mahal Hotel, with its gilded splendor, was a chessboard, and the killer was making their final moves. Tomorrow, she resolved, I shall checkmate them, just as I did with that dreadful Mr. Hodge and his poisoned jam. Chapter 7. The Unveiling. The Taj Mahal Hotel, its grand arches silhouetted against the rosy dawn, stood as a silent sentinel over Bombay's restless sea. Within its walls, the air crackled with anticipation, as if the very stones knew the truth about Rajesh Kapoor's murder was nearing revelation. Miss Jane Marple, her white hair neatly pinned and her knitting bag at her side, sat in the sea lounge, her sharp eyes scanning the morning's subdued bustle. The clues had woven a tight net, the cyanide in the chai, the aconite vial discarded as a decoy, the forged will, the threatening note in indigo ink, and the damning scrap of fabric from Priya's sari. Yet, like a St. Mary Mead puzzle, the final piece eluded her, a motive that tied the threads into a coherent whole. It's like Mrs. Langley's rose garden, she mused, beautifully tangled, but with a pattern if you look closely. Determined to lay the matter bare, Miss Marple requested a final gathering in the crystal room, where the chandeliers cast prismatic light across the polished teak table. Inspector Vikram Patel, his notebook worn from constant use, agreed. his respect for the elderly sleuth now evident in his deferential nod. By noon the suspects assembled, their faces a gallery of nerves and defiance. Colonel Desmond Blake, his moustache bristling with indignation. Amelia Blake, her eyes darting like a cornered doe. Dr. Elias Thorne, his tremor subdued but his spectacles fogged with anxiety. Priya Kapoor, her composure brittle as she clutched her bracelet. And Sir Reginald and Lady Edith Hargreaves, their hands clasped tightly, as if bracing for a storm. Miss Marple stood, her slight frame commanding the room with quiet authority. "In my village," she began, her voice clear as a bell, "I've seen how secrets fester, how small slights grow into deadly grudges. Mr. Kapoor's death was no impulse. It was a calculated act, draped in misdirection." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Let us start with the cyanide, swift and lethal, delivered in his evening chai. The dagger plunged post-mortem was a theatrical flourish to suggest a different crime. The aconite vial, discarded in the garden, was meant to confuse, not kill." She turned to Dr. Thorne, whose fingers twitched. "The telegram, Thorne knows, hinted at your involvement in Mr. Kapoor's smuggling ventures. You admitted to advising him on artifacts, but your cufflinks, bearing his guild's insignia, suggest a deeper tie. Were you complicit, or merely a pawn?" Thorne's voice was hoarse. "I knew of his dealings, illicit trades in Muggle relics, but I never profited. He threatened to expose me unless I cooperated." Miss Marple nodded. Yet the forged will naming you beneficiary was too blatant, a clumsy attempt to shift blame. Her gaze shifted to Colonel Blake, who stiffened. "Colonel, your grudge against Kapoor was old but bitter, rooted in army days. Your presence near his suite and the cyanide in your room pointed to you, but too neatly. Someone wanted you suspected." Blake's face reddened, but he held his tongue. Amelia, beside him, clutched her locket, its miniature of Rajesh, now a public secret. "Mrs. Blake," Miss Marple said gently, "your past with Kapoor, perhaps an indiscretion, gave him leverage. Your note to Dr. Thorne sought escape, not murder, but it muddied the waters." She turned to Sir Reginald, whose florid face paled. "Your debt to Kapoor was crushing, Sir Reginald. His death erased it, but Lady Edith's alibi for you holds barely. Desperation is a motive, but not yours, I think." Lady Edith's eyes brimmed with relief, though her grip on her husband tightened. Finally, Miss Marple faced Priya Kapoor, whose bracelet gleamed like a silent accusation. "Miss Kapoor, you spoke of your uncle's cruelty, his control over your life. The bracelet you wear was listed among the safe's contents, stolen, I believe, by you. The threatening note, penned in indigo ink, matches your writing, disguised but not perfectly. The fabric from your sari, caught on the banyan tree, places you in the garden where the aconite was discarded." Priya's eyes flashed, her voice sharp. "You've no proof. I grieved for him." Miss Marple's smile was serene but unyielding. "Grief can mask rage, my dear. In St. Mary Mead, a girl named Lucy poisoned her guardian for freedom. Your uncle cut you from his will, yes, but there's more. A waiter overheard you arguing with him about a forbidden love. A rival merchant, perhaps? Rajesh threatened to ruin you both." She produced a folded paper from her bag, a letter, intercepted by the hotel staff, from Priya to a man named Vikram, confessing her desperation to escape her uncle's grasp. The room gasped. Patel's eyes widened as he took the letter. "Miss Kapoor, explain this." Priya's composure shattered, her voice rising to a wail. He controlled everything, my life, my love. Vikram and I wanted to marry, but Rajesh forbade it, said he'd ruin us. I poisoned his chai, cyanide, quick and quiet. The dagger was to make it look like a robbery, the will to frame Thorn. I took the jewels to start anew. She collapsed, sobbing, as Patel signalled for constables to restrain her. The room fell silent, the chandelier's light cold and unyielding. Miss Marple spoke softly. The balcony footprint was yours, Miss Kapoor, size 6 left to mislead. You entered via the balcony, poured the cyanide, and staged the scene. The aconite was a decoy, discarded to suggest another hand. Patel nodded, his voice grim. The letter confirms it. You're under arrest, Miss Kapoor. As Priya was led away, the group dispersed in stunned silence. Colonel Blake muttered about modern immorality, while Amelia clung to him, her locket discarded. Dr. Thorne, visibly relieved, vowed to sever ties with the antiquities trade. Sir Reginald and Lady Edith thanked Miss Marple profusely, their relief palpable. "How did you see it, Jane?" Edith asked, her voice trembling. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "My dear, it's like old Miss Hargrove's niece in the village. Quiet, dutiful, but burning with resentment. The smallest details betray the heart." That evening, Miss Marple dined alone, the sea's murmur a soothing backdrop. The case was solved, yet she felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction, like finishing a complex scarf. She thought of Priya, driven by love and rage, and of the others, each hiding their own frailties. "Human nature," she murmured, "is the same, from St. Mary Mead to Bombay." As she packed for her voyage home, the Taj Mahal Hotel's grandeur faded into memory, its secrets laid bare. The ship awaited, and with it the promise of quieter days. Though Miss Marple knew, with a wry smile, that trouble had a way of finding her.